The week I was left home alone, my family had gone on vacation, and I was stuck working. At around 2 a.m., I found myself watching a horror movie in the dark basement, determined to see how scared I could get while still feeling safe in my own house. That's when I heard heavy footsteps on the first floor. It was a common annoyance when my family was home. Their footsteps echoed in the front hallway, just past the basement door. This time, however, fear gripped me at the sound. My instinct was to turn off the television right away, knowing the basement door was up a flight of stairs and around a corner, so no one would see the light. As I sat in complete darkness, I heard the basement door handle click and turn. I moved slowly and silently, crawling behind our large television. As I inched past it, I panicked when I saw the screen still dimly glowing. I could hear footsteps on the carpeted and creaky stairs. Hiding behind the TV, I listened. For several long minutes, there was nothing. Did the intruder see the faint glow from the screen, or had it faded in time? Was someone standing in the pitch black, listening for me? I lay there in absolute silence for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, my panic subsided, and I started to think more clearly. Was it really an intruder? Could someone stand there without making a sound for so long? The basement was eerily quiet. The silence had become painful. Was it possible for a person to avoid making any noise at all? If there was an intruder, they were still in the basement, since the noisy stairs and door handle would have given them away. I started counting in my head to pass the time, saliva dripping onto the carpet as I didn't dare swallow. I counted to 60 once, twice, 30 times, 60 times. My fear had faded, and I was mostly confused. I estimated that I had been crouching in the dark for nearly 2 hours without hearing anything. None of it made sense. Eventually, I knew I had to act. Soon, sunlight would stream through the small basement windows, and a horrible, sickly smell was growing stronger. Slowly, I began to inch towards the stairs along the walls. If someone was standing there, I could sneak around them and bolt up the stairs. As I moved, the awful odor intensified. Was there a dead animal down here? The thought of some corpse-like creature lurking in the dark sent me into a panic, and I moved as quickly and quietly as possible. Just as I reached the stairs, a tremendous crash sounded as if something had fallen or collapsed. That's when I sprang forward, sprinting up the stairs and out of the open basement door and the wide-open front door. Convinced someone was in the house, I called the police from my cell phone and watched from a distance. The police arrived, inspected the house, and returned with grim expressions. They had found a body, my elderly neighbor, who appeared to have suffered a heart attack. They suspected that I left the front door unlocked, and he had entered my house seeking help. At first I felt terrible, thinking I had sat in the dark while the old man died just a few feet away. But then it hit me. What caused that loud crashing sound that made me run upstairs and out of the house? The police confirmed the back door was also open, with a single bare footprint in the mud. Somehow, for reasons I'll never know, there was someone else in the basement with us. Silent, waiting, and listening in the dark over the lifeless body of an old man. Ever since I can remember, I've been living with my grandmother. My mom got divorced when I was really young and remarried soon after. Because of their financial struggles, my grandmother let my mom and her new husband stay in her garage until they could get back on their feet. There wasn't enough space for me there, so I continued living with my grandma. When my mom and stepdad finally bought a house, I had already made friends in the neighborhood and felt attached to it. So I decided to stay with my grandma and finish school there. I later moved in with some acquaintances for a while, but that only lasted about a year. I figured it was the perfect time to live with my mom and stepdad and get to know them better. At the time, I was dating my now wife, and we were planning to get married as soon as we could save enough money. We both decided to live with our parents to save up for the wedding and avoid any additional debt on top of our student loans. My sister was away at college, so I moved into her old room in the basement. The basement was nicely set up with an entertainment room and a wet bar that my stepdad built. I managed to move all my stuff in on a Friday night and quickly fell asleep, exhausted from the move. The next day in the late afternoon, I went downstairs to play video games and noticed an old rocking chair in the dimly lit room near the wet bar. I felt an eerie presence in the room, but brushed it off, played some video games, and forgot about it. Around 1 a.m. I went to bed, hearing my parents still playing games on their laptops upstairs. My mom had mentioned that keeping the door to the laundry room open would let sunlight in, making it easier to wake up in the morning. As I walked past the open laundry room door, I felt the presence again, stronger this time, and quickly rushed into the bathroom and then back to my room. I left my bedroom door slightly open to let sunlight in, turned on my box fan, and got into bed, positioning myself so I could see the door. As I tried to fall asleep, I felt like I was being watched. The door had opened wider, probably due to the fan, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. I could sense the presence just beyond my doorway, and I kept my eyes closed, afraid to look. The presence seemed to move around my room, but never got closer to my bed. I tried to ignore it, focusing on video games and the next day's plans. Eventually, I fell into a dreamless sleep. From that night on, I felt a presence watching me from just outside my doorway. It would come into my room and move around, but never get closer to me. I told myself I was just being childish or stressed from wedding planning. However, I never looked when the presence was there and always slept with my back against the wall. After about 8 months, I couldn't take it anymore and decided to sleep with my door closed. I kept my same sleeping position, and for a while it seemed like the presence wouldn't show up. But soon enough, I felt it again, waiting just outside the door in the laundry room. I felt slightly more secure knowing it couldn't see me anymore, but I still didn't like the fact that I could feel it waiting, lingering in the shadows just outside my door. The next night, I decided not only to close my door, but also close the laundry room door that led out to the entertainment room and upstairs. It didn't help much. That night, I could feel the presence lurking in the entertainment room, pacing around the wall and door that separated me from the rest of the basement. It was still unsettling, but the feeling was lessened enough that I was able to sleep much better. I started shutting both doors at night, but this came at a heavy price. I no longer woke up to my alarm on time, sometimes hours late for work. This wouldn't do, so I decided to buy one of those outdoor light timers to turn my standing lamp on across the room at a certain time. This worked for about a week or so, but the timing quickly became off. No matter how many times I set it to the correct time, it would either go off way too early, way too late, or not at all. I decided it was time to just man up, open both doors, and let the sunlight help wake me up again. As soon as I turned my light out, the presence returned. It felt stronger than ever, as if it were infuriated that I shut it out of my room. However, the presence still stayed across the room from my bed, so I just forced myself to fall asleep each night, ignoring the presence lurking in the pitch-black corners of my room. In a fit of rebellion against the presence, I began shutting the doors on weekends when I could afford to accidentally sleep in. Of course, the presence did not enjoy this decision of mine one bit. After a few weeks of shutting the thing out on weekends, the one thing I had hoped would never happen began to occur. The presence began to move closer to my bed. It was a Tuesday night when it first started. It moved ever so slightly from its preferred corner to the middle of the room. For the next few nights, it stayed in the center of the room and stopped roaming the opposite wall. The weekend was pretty peaceful. I didn't even feel it roaming the entertainment room the whole weekend. It was as if the presence scared itself by getting too close. That Sunday night, though, everything changed. As I turned the light out, preparing for the inevitable presence to come waltzing back into my room, it came quicker than it ever has before. It didn't go across the room to its usual spot or to the middle of the room. It came closer than ever before, just my nightstand, in between it and me. I was definitely frightened and couldn't think. All I could do was remain motionless and let the void drink me in, eyes shut tight. After a few minutes, unsure of the actual span of time, the presence moved to the foot of my bed. The presence didn't stay still. I could feel it constantly shifting at the foot of my bed, pacing back and forth. I knew not how I could even attempt to sleep, feeling what seemed like contempt or possibly hatred coming from the foot of my bed. Thankfully, the presence calmed itself and moved back to the center of the room for the rest of the night. I only had to put up with this for another few weeks. As my wedding date was approaching fast, I was very much ready to be rid of my parents' home. Whatever was in their basement was becoming too much for me to handle. Over the course of the few weeks leading up to my wedding, the presence would always come quickly and hover near my bed and at the foot of my bed. I slept less, ate less, and was becoming generally unpleasant to be around with this presence haunting me and compounding with the stress of the wedding. It was my second to last night at my mother's house when I decided I wanted to know what was coming into my room. I don't know why it never occurred to me before. I dug through some old stuff of mine from when I was a child that my mother had laying around in a closet and grabbed a nightlight. I plugged that bastard in over by the corner the presence used to hang out at. Now I'd be able to see, even if it was only a little bit, what was entering my room. I also wondered if it even would enter due to the fact a light was on, but with this nightmare almost over, I was feeling braver than ever. It was about 2 a.m. when I decided to go to sleep, so I plugged the nightlight in and hesitated at opening my door. There was no going back from this. Once I turned my light out, either that presence would rush in or it wouldn't, choosing to shy away from the nightlight. I breathed deeply, opened both doors, and darted for my bed. I, again, hesitated turning my light out. I still had a chance to back out. I didn't have to work the next morning because it was the day before the wedding. I could still close both doors and sleep soundly. I mulled over this thought for a minute or two and ultimately decided that if I didn't do it now, I'd never know. I turned the light out and for the first time kept my eyes open while drawing the covers up around me as close as possible. I couldn't see yet, as my eyes had not adjusted to the dim lighting. I could already feel the presence outside my doorway, waiting in the laundry room. My eyes began to cut through the shadows, and I could see the void had a shape. It was squat, sat low to the ground, but I couldn't see a full outline of the thing. I was terrified, never actually believing something would be there. I didn't budge and just stared at the thing, obscured by the darkness of the laundry room. I couldn't help myself and closed my eyes tight. I debated whether I'd open them or not for a good long while, but I knew for sure I wasn't going to move a muscle. I decided to peek again, and what I saw still chills me to my core this day. The squat creature I could now see was actually just crouched down with its hands placed on the floor between its feet, sitting in the middle of my room. I looked directly into its wide, unblinking eyes, completely horrified that my mother was crouched on the floor staring intently at me, her head cocked to the side with a tiny grin on her face. Her curly, dark blonde hair was disheveled and all over the place. Had this been going on for over a year? My mother staring creepily at me while I slept. Did she do this to my sister? Was she possessed? A million questions raced through my mind in the span of seconds. But as quickly as I discovered it had been my mother watching me the entire time, she began to move out of the room. She slowly shifted her hands and feet, keeping them close to the floor, moving sideways to keep staring at me with her insane glare. She paused again at my doorway for the longest minute in my life, and then vanished into the darkness of the laundry room. I couldn't feel her creepy stare coming from the laundry room. She must have moved on back to the entertainment room, or straight back upstairs. I really hoped it was back upstairs, but I wasn't brave enough to find out yet. If my mom was crazy or something, I'd rather not provoke her. Who knows what she would do in that state of mind? I checked the time on my phone, and it had been over an hour since she left my room, and I'd stopped feeling her presence. I clicked my light on and sat up in bed. I thought maybe it'd be best to at least check on her, see if she did make it back to bed, or not. That's how you die in horror movies, I thought. I could see into the laundry room and knew she wasn't hiding in there, so I thought it best to at least close the doors. She never bothered to open them before. I got up and slowly made my way over to the laundry room door. Not thinking about it, I glanced out into the entertainment room and could see my mother, crouched in the same position on the far side of the room by the rocking chair, staring intently at me in the doorway. She kept tilting her head back and forth slowly, never breaking eye contact. I froze. A brand new wave of terror kept me bolted to the floor. My mother began to shuffle toward me, tilting her head back and forth all while, her smile now wide and seemingly menacing. I shut the door before she could reach me, ran into my room, and locked the door. I heard a thud as she slammed into the door. Once, twice, 3 times, she slammed against the door. I was stricken with fear, gripping onto a pair of wooden nunchucks I'd bought from a flea market when I was younger. I couldn't hit my mother, could I? Either way, it made me feel safer. The thumping on the laundry room door stopped. A week later, I woke up one night in a cold sweat with my wife sleeping soundly beside me. I was feeling thirsty and got up for a drink of water from the kitchen. I made my way into the kitchen and poured a tall, cold glass. As I drank, I heard something shuffle outside by the front door. I didn't think anything of it. It was probably the neighbor across from me. Then the door handle started to twist. Back and forth, the handle moved, squeaking lightly with each turn. I looked out the peephole, but no one was there. I closed the peephole and grabbed the handle to keep it from turning. I could feel the pressure of someone trying to twist the handle back and forth on the other side of the door. After a moment, they stopped trying to turn the handle. I looked out the peephole again and saw my mother, crouched low to the ground, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes and that menacing grin. When I was about 4 years old, my parents got divorced. They were constantly at each other's throats because they were both extremely narcissistic and had addiction issues. When they finally split, my mother completely banned me from seeing my dad. No contact or visiting or anything. It had been maybe a year since I had seen him. This, of course, would make any parent lose their mind, but my dad took it to an extreme. He began stalking our family, following us to the grocery store or just having his car parked outside our house to watch us. Of course, I was too young to know what was happening, so I wasn't told about this until I was older. My mom eventually got a restraining order, and things seemed to quiet down and become calmer. One day, my cousins came from out of state to visit and were staying the night at our house. My cousin Elena and I were pretty much inseparable, so naturally we stayed up all night. One night, around 1 in the morning, we decided to sneak out of our room to go play on our computer in the basement. As we headed down there, we kept whispering and laughing, so we could definitely be heard if someone was nearby. Once we were in the basement and started to head to the computer, which was around the corner, all of a sudden, I was overcome with a sense of someone watching us and just pure fear. I shushed my cousin, and even though she was 2 years older, she saw how serious I looked. I looked in front of us and saw an open window that was at ground level. Suddenly, I sensed exactly where the person was, and somehow knew who it was. I turned to the computer desk and said, "Dad." And there he was. My dad came up from under the desk. Even though I had sensed him there, I was still shocked I was right. I was completely terrified because I knew this wasn't right and that he shouldn't be in the house. He looked at me and only said, "Don't tell your mother." He then crawled back out the window. I was so scared, but I didn't hesitate to run upstairs to get my mom, who was passed out drunk. She didn't wake up when I called out her name, so I jumped up on the bed and started shaking her. She finally woke up, and I just started crying and telling her that Dad was in the house, and he told me not to tell her. Since my mom had been an alcoholic for decades, she was a functional drunk, so she was able to sober up real quick and call the police. My heart was still racing when the police came to the house. When the policeman started asking me questions, I got so scared that I just fainted right there. I have no memory of what happened after I woke up. Years later, I was told by my brother that he had a similar experience. He woke up one night with a strange feeling and caught my dad trying to put drugs in my mom's vodka bottle. After that incident, my dad was arrested. I still have no idea how I knew my dad was there and that it was him. I still get nightmares pretty much nightly of my father, but I do make sure all the windows are locked every night. As night falls, we implore you to recall the spine-chilling story you just heard. Don't be afraid, for there are numerous other tales waiting to be uncovered. If you are brave enough to explore the unknown, please like and subscribe to our channel, where we delve into the depths of horror and leave no stone unturned. We now ask you, our esteemed audience, a question. What do you make of the dreadful conclusion to this story? If you found yourself in the same ominous circumstance, would you have reacted with the same valor, or would you have surrendered to the darkness? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. But always remember, nothing can shield you from the disquieting truth that the hazards of this digital era are ever present, lurking in the shadows, and waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. Join our free Telegram group, if you dare. Share your own terrifying experiences, read spine-chilling accounts from others, and take part in bone-chilling discussions. However, be warned that once you've entered, there's no turning back. So sleep soundly, dear viewers, and may your dreams be haunted by the echoes of this terrifying tale.